You can be raised in a house with no hitting, no screaming, no addiction, and still be deeply traumatized. Here's the proof. There's a version of you that was shaped before you even knew who you were. A version of you that learned how to survive, not how to live. And if you grew up in a home where things weren't okay, that version of you is still running the show. Today, we're going to break down exactly what happens to the psychology of people who had a difficult childhood, and why so many of the patterns you're dealing with right now started long before you had a choice. Real quick, if no one has ever explained your own behavior back to you in a way that actually made sense, this channel is going to be your favorite place on the internet. Hit subscribe right now. I drop psychology content every single week, and I promise it hits different. Now let's get into it. Here, what most people don't understand about a difficult childhood, it's not always obvious. It doesn't always look like the worst-case scenario you see in movies. Sometimes it looked like a home, where everything seemed fine on the outside. But on the inside, you were constantly walking on eggshells. By the end of this video, you're going to understand exactly why people from difficult childhoods behave the way they do, in relationships, at work, even alone in their own heads. And there's one psychological response in particular, one that most people have never heard of, that explains almost everything. I'll get to that in just a few minutes. The brain that learned to survive. When you grow up in an environment that feels unsafe, emotionally, physically, or psychologically, your brain does something remarkable. It rewires itself. This isn't a metaphor. Neuroscience shows us that chronic stress in childhood literally reshapes the developing brain, particularly the amygdala, which controls fear responses, and the prefrontal cortex, which handles decision-making and emotional regulation. What this means in real life. People who had difficult childhoods often grow up hypervigilant, constantly scanning for danger, even when there is none. They're not overreacting. Their brain was trained to expect the worst because, at some point, the worst kept happening. They might flinch at raised voices. They might read too much into someone's tone. They might feel a wave of anxiety they can't explain when things are going too well, because their nervous system associates calm with the silence before the storm. And here's the part nobody talks about, that survival mode. It helped you then. It kept you safe, but it was never meant to follow you into adulthood. The relationship patterns they can't shake. Now this is where it gets really interesting, because the effects of a difficult childhood don't stay locked inside you. They show up everywhere, especially in relationships. Psychologists call this attachment theory. The bond you form, or fail to form, with your earliest caregivers becomes the template your brain uses for every relationship that follows. Question 2, viewer. Have you ever found yourself pushing someone away the moment they got too close, or clinging to people even when they weren't good for you? That's not a personality flaw. That's a learned attachment pattern. People from difficult childhoods often fall into one of 3 patterns. 1, the avoider. They shut down emotionally because emotions weren't safe growing up. They seem cold, distant, or emotionally unavailable, but underneath, they're protecting themselves. 2, the anxious attacher. They become obsessed with the relationship working, terrified of abandonment, sometimes suffocating the very people they love. 3, the disorganized. They want closeness desperately, but intimacy also triggers fear. So they pull you in and push you away, sometimes in the same day. If you just thought, wait, that's literally me. Yeah, welcome to the club, we meet every Tuesday. But here's the thing, knowing your pattern is only half of it, because there's a deeper mechanism controlling all 3 of these responses. And it's the one thing I told you about earlier. We're almost there. The invisible wounds, what they feel but can't name. One of the most painful parts of growing up in a difficult household is that the wounds are often invisible, even to the person carrying them. People who had difficult childhoods often grow up feeling like something is wrong with them, without understanding why. They experience a deep, persistent sense of shame, not guilt over something they did, but shame about who they are. Difficulty trusting people. even people who have given them every reason to. A pattern of self-sabotage, unconsciously destroying good things because their brain doesn't believe good things are allowed to last. And emotional dysregulation, massive emotional reactions to small triggers, because those triggers aren't just about the present moment. They're activating old wounds. Psychologist Dr. Bessel van der Kolk put it this way: the body keeps the score. The trauma doesn't live only in your memories. It lives in your nervous system, your posture, your physical reactions. The child who had to make themselves invisible to survive grows into an adult who struggles to take up space in the world. The child who was never allowed to express anger grows into an adult who either explodes at the wrong moments or suppresses everything until they shut down completely. The hidden strengths, the side nobody talks about. Now here's something I need you to hear, because most videos on this topic stop at the damage, and that's not the full picture. People who survived difficult childhoods often develop extraordinary strengths. Resilience that most people can't comprehend. They've been through fire and they're still here. Empathy that runs unusually deep, because they learned early how to read a room, how to feel what others feel before those feelings are even spoken. An ability to function in chaos that others find paralyzing, because chaos was their normal. Creativity, independence, and an inner world that is rich, because they often had to find safety and meaning inside themselves when the outside world didn't provide it. Question 2, viewer. How many of those feel familiar to you? These aren't accidents. These are the gifts that grew from the struggle, even when the struggle wasn't fair. The one mechanism behind it all. Okay, I promised you the one psychological mechanism that connects everything, the survival patterns, the relationship wounds, the strengths, all of it. It's called the adapted child response. Developed from the work of psychologist Eric Berne, this concept explains that when children grow up in environments that are unpredictable or unsafe, they don't just react, they adapt. They develop a version of themselves that is specifically designed to survive that particular environment. The problem: that adapted version becomes the default. Even decades later, in completely different circumstances, that child self is still running the responses. The people pleaser who can never say no, they're not weak. They're still the child who learned that saying no was dangerous. The overachiever who can never feel like enough, they're still trying to earn love that was made conditional. The person who expects to be abandoned, they're still bracing for the rejection they grew up experiencing. This is why simply knowing better isn't enough. The adapted child doesn't respond to logic. It responds to felt safety. And that takes time and often support to rebuild. If any of this resonated with you, I want you to know something. The fact that you're here, watching a video like this, trying to understand yourself, that's already the work. Most people never get there. You are not broken. You are adapted. And adapted things can be readapted with the right understanding, the right tools, and a little bit of patience with yourself. Now, if this video helped you see yourself more clearly, do me one favor. Subscribe to this channel. I cover psychology and human behavior every single week in a way that actually makes sense. No jargon, no lectures, just real explanations for why people do what they do. And drop a comment below. Which part of this video hit the hardest for you? Number it for me 1 through 5. I read every single one. I'll see you in the next one. Brain.